others.
I have.
We'll patch him up, staunch the blood, and as soon as he's recovered enough, we'll get him back to his palazzo. Don't worry, Ezio. He is indeed safe now, and we will not forget what you have done. But Ezio was already thinking of Francesco di Pazzi. The man had had more than enough time to make good his escape. "I must take my leave," he said. "Wait," Lorenzo called. Nodding to Poliziano, Ezio went over to him and knelt by his side. "I am in your debt, signore," Lorenzo said, "and I do not know why you helped me, or how you could have known what was afoot, when even my own spies could not." He paused, his eyes wrinkling in pain, as one of the attendants cleaned his shoulder wound. "Who are you?" he continued when he had recovered a little. "He's Ezio Auditore," said Poliziano, coming up and placing a hand on Ezio's shoulder. "Ezio!" Lorenzo gazed at him, deeply moved. "Your father was a great man and a good friend. He was one of my strongest allies. He understood honor, loyalty, and never put his own interests before those of Florence. But—" he paused again and smiled faintly. "I was there when Alberti died. Was it you?" "Yes. You took a fitting and swift revenge. As you see, I have not been so successful, but now, through their overweening ambition, the Pazzi have at last cut their own throats. I pray that—" One of the men from the Medici patrol that had been sent out to deal with Ezio's Pazzi pursuers came hurrying up, his face streaked with blood and sweat. "What is it?" asked Poliziano. "Bad news, sir. The Pazzi have rallied, and they are storming the Palazzo Vecchio. We can't hold them off much longer." Poliziano grew pale. "This is bad news indeed. If they gain control of it, they'll kill all the supporters we have that they can lay their hands on, and if they seize power—" "If they seize power," Lorenzo said, "my survival will mean nothing. We will all be dead men." He tried to get up, but fell back, groaning in pain. "Angelo, you must take what troops we have here and—" "No, my place is with you. We must get you to the Palazzo Medici as soon as possible. From there we may be able to reorganize and hit back." "I will go," said Ezio. "I have unfinished business with Messer Francesco as it is." Lorenzo looked at him. "You have done enough." "Not until this job is finished, Altezza. And Angelo is right. He has a more important task to perform, getting you to the safety of your palazzo." "Signori," the Medici messenger put in, "I have more news. I saw Francesco di Pazzi leading a troop to the rear of the Palazzo Vecchio. He's seeking a way in on the Signoria's blind side." Poliziano looked at Ezio. "Go, arm yourself, and take a detachment from here and hurry. This man will go with you and be your guide. He will show you where it is safest to leave this church. From there, it will take you 10 minutes to reach the Palazzo Vecchio." Ezio bowed and turned to leave. "Florence will never forget what you are doing for her," said Lorenzo. "Go with God." Outside, the bells of most of the churches were ringing, adding to the cacophony of clashing steel and of human cries and groans. The city was in turmoil. Wagons set afire blazed in the streets. Pockets of soldiery from both sides ran hither and yon, or faced each other in pitched melees. The dead were scattered everywhere, in the squares and along the roadways, but there was too much tumult for the crows to dare to fly in for the feast they regarded with their harsh black eyes from the rooftops. The western doors of the Palazzo Vecchio stood open, and the noise of fighting came from the courtyard within. Ezio brought his little troop to a halt and accosted a Medici officer who was running towards the palazzo in charge of another squad. "Do you know what's going on?" "The Pazzi broke in from the rear and opened the doors from within, but our men inside the palazzo are keeping them off. They haven't got beyond the courtyard. With luck, we'll be able to hem them in." "Is there news of Francesco di Pazzi?" "He and his men are holding the back entrance of the palazzo. If we could gain control of that, we'd have trapped them for sure." Ezio turned to his men.
Let's go!" he shouted.
They rushed across the square and down the narrow street which ran along the north wall of the palazzo, where a very different Ezio had climbed to his father's cell window long ago, and taking the first right from it, quickly encountered the Pazzi troop under Francesco guarding the rear entrance. They were immediately on their guard, and when Francesco recognized Ezio, he cried,
"You again! Why aren't you dead? You murdered my son!"
"He tried to murder me."
"Kill him! Kill him now!"
The two sides engaged fiercely, hacking and cutting at each other in near desperate fury, for the Pazzi knew full well how important it was to protect their line of retreat. Ezio, cold rage in his heart, muscled his way towards Francesco, who took a stand with his back to the palazzo door. The sword Ezio had taken from the Medici armory was well balanced, and its blade was of Toledo steel, but the weapon was unfamiliar to him, and, as a consequence, his blows were a fraction less effective than he'd normally inflict. He had maimed rather than killed the men who had stood in his way. This Francesco had noticed.
"You think yourself a master swordsman now, do you, boy? You can't even make a clean kill. Let me give you a demonstration."
They fell on each other then, sparks flying from their blades as they clashed. But Francesco had less room to maneuver than Ezio, and, 20 years his senior, was beginning to tire, even though he had seen less action that day than his opponent.
"Guards!" he cried at last. "To me!"
But his men had fallen back before the Medici onslaught. He and Ezio now faced each other alone. Francesco looked desperately around for a means of retreat himself, but there was none, save through the palazzo itself. He threw open the door behind him and went up a stone staircase that ran up the inside wall. Ezio realized that as most of the Medici defenders would be concentrated at the front of the building, where most of the fighting was, they probably didn't have enough men to cover the rear as well. Ezio raced up after him to the second floor. The rooms here were deserted, since all the occupants of the palazzo, save for half a dozen frightened clerks who ran away as soon as they saw them, were down below, fighting to contain the Pazzi in the courtyard. Francesco and Ezio fought their way through the gilded, high-ceilinged staterooms until they reached a balcony high above the Piazza della Signoria. The noise of battle reached up to them from below, and Francesco called out hopelessly for aid, but there was no one to hear him, and his last retreat was cut off.
"Stand and fight," said Ezio. "It's just us now." "Maledetto!"
Ezio slashed at him, drawing blood from his left arm.
"Come on, Francesco. Where's all the courage you showed when you had my father killed? When you stabbed Giuliano this morning?" "Get the hell away from me, you spawn of the devil!"
Francesco lunged, but he was tiring, and his aim went far too wide. He staggered forwards, his balance thrown, and Ezio stood deftly aside, raising his foot and bringing it firmly down on Francesco's sword blade, pulling the man down with it. Before Francesco could recover, Ezio stamped on his hand, making him let go of the hilt, grabbed him by the shoulder, and heaved him over onto his back. As he struggled to get up, Ezio kicked him brutally in the face. Francesco's eyes rolled as he struggled into unconsciousness. Ezio knelt down and proceeded to frisk the old man while he was half awake, ripping off body armor and his doublet, revealing the pale, wiry body beneath. But there were no documents, nothing of importance on him, just a handful of florins in his purse. Ezio flung aside his sword and released his spring blade.